You like affordable cars? I know I do. I don't want to be in debt for something like this for 10 years. And that's what the Corolla Sedan's about. I've already done a video on the Corolla Hatch. And now, granted, this is the XSE, which is like $28,000. You don't have to spend that much to get a lot of features. You can go to the lower trim levels. But let's cover some of the good things and the bad things about why you wouldn't buy this car. Let's talk about the good and the bad of the Corolla XSE sedan. Now, the big thing to talk about is this interior space feels far more modern. It's really well laid out in terms of storage, a good mix of like hard plastic, soft touch materials. It doesn't feel like a total budget rental car, and it doesn't feel super basic like the previous generation Corolla did. There's some geometry to the dash, like this whole center layout, the way that it kind of sweeps over, the cross stitching. It's just a nice effect. And they do some good things here as well. Like the upper door panels are really hard plastic. In a lot of cases, it does look cheap, but it's going to be super durable. And I could see using this. It's very utilitarian. Like if I'm schlepping my backpack out, which I always do, I take it out of the passenger seat. Getting out, I'm not going to tear up this door. There's no like fancy pants material. But yet the armrest area is pretty soft, especially on the center armrest area here. Now the armrest doesn't telescope forward and back, so you're kind of locked in there, but everything else by your knee area is kind of soft touch. It's set up where it has a high wow factor where you're looking at all the time. Now the negatives are, as much as there's some geometry to the dash, I hate how bulbous this side piece is by your left knee on the upper dash. And if you sit closer to the steering wheel, I've blasted my knee and my shin into this plastic that protrudes so many times. I can't tell you, it is like, I would have to put padding on it if I own this car, but if you sit farther back in the seat, you may never notice that. The worst part about this car in terms of aesthetics is this horrible chunk of cheap ass plastic that's stuck on this dash. This has to be one of the worst implementations of a touchscreen or infotainment design. It looks like a kid's toy. And I'm not kidding you. I've seen kids' toys that have better bezel design and like better plastics on this. It drags down the whole aesthetic of the interior, and it's kind of like distracting. Like if I'm looking over there to turn, I'm always seeing this damn screen in my line of sight, and it's so reflective. But they make up for it with the HVAC controls all being separated from it, and it's really easy to get to without having to look at it. All your knobs, buttons, and switches on the steering wheel work well. Your stalks, your center gauge cluster with the XSE is a big screen, but they integrate it well with the old analog gauges. The point is that everything that you've used for such a long time still works here without having to think about it. And that's the main thing when you're using a car every day. There's certain things that are going to annoy you that might be deal breakers, and there's not a lot of them here. Your shifter is the old school mechanical feel. There's no digital crap here. Your back seat room is kind of compromised. I'll be honest, it's best for like a smaller kid or smaller people, but the front occupants reap all the benefits. When you have these seats all the way back, it feels like a bigger car. There's so much room up front. And the trunk space, you'd think, because this is not the hatch, that you'd have a huge penalty for just having a trunk. But with this carpeted mat in the back, I was so impressed at how good the quality was and how much room there was in there. I could fit a 42-inch slider, which is for my camera gear, a huge case, a big chunk of luggage for traveling. I mean, it's just a totally usable car if you have a small family, if you're just a couple people. You don't really need much more than this. But I think, there's other things to talk about. As you go up in the trim levels, you get more fluff, like heated seats, and the seats are super comfortable, but I feel like the max in here is like 2 hours before you start to feel a little bit stiff. There's not a ton of padding, but it's, again, you get in here, you figure it out right away. Let's take this thing for a drive and see how it does. It's 2 a.m. I'm trying to enjoy the drive alone on the roads with the Corolla XSE sedan. So let's talk about it. Drivability wise, much like the hatchback, this is very, very comfortable. It rides soft, it still maintains a great agility to it, which means if you want to drive it hard, it feels like it's going to handle without rolling around, something that the old Corolla had a really hard time with. It is eager to get going, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you're going to buy this, the XSE comes with the 2-liter with the direct shift CVT, which means it has a physical first gear, which means when you drive it, it feels a lot less synthetic. It feels more natural to drive, like traditional automatic transmissions. And I know people are going to complain, well, I don't feel shifts with a CVT. And I think a lot of manufacturers have started to screw up this formula by doing a couple things, making all their CVTs feel like traditional torque-converted automatics. And the problem is, now they somewhat feel broken and they're inconsistent in their performance. One of the reasons why I like this car, the way they've programmed it, is it's almost completely transparent to a normal driver. You get behind the wheel, you don't notice any weirdness in the shifting, you don't think, oh, why is it doing that, or is it broken, most of the time. When you're driving like a normal person and you're taking off from a light and you pound it down, it feels smooth. The acceleration is really good on the 2-liter. This is the engine that I would get, and you can get it in the SE model with the same transmission or a manual transmission, and that's around $22,000. And I think that's the sweet spot for this car. You get the good engine, you get the better CVT, or you get a manual option and you get most of the features you want. But with the XSE, this is like 25, 26, and then you add all the other crap, it winds up being like 28,000. All right, let's talk about two different things with the CVT. Now, with the direct shift, you can put it in sport. And what this does is it simulates harder fake shifts. So in between, so basically it hands off from a physical gear in first gear. Then you go to second and it transitions into the CVT. So basically all these simulated shifts after, in sport mode, it gives you more of a jerk, like, ooh, it's faster. And it's really just mostly synthetic. It makes you feel like you're going faster, but you really aren't. And I would just leave it in normal mode, and it virtually does the same thing. It just feels a little bit more rubber bandy, which I will kind of show you here. So it's slower to engage. Like when it goes to the CVT and it kind of goes into that second and third, it will kind of smoothly go down so you don't feel as much shock in between the fake shifts. And that's really the only difference here. And, honestly, you're not gonna drive this like a maniac. And if you are, you're probably gonna get a manual transmission anyway, to be honest. But I really, really like the CVT for normal driving. I think most people are not gonna have any issue with it. The 2-liter, the direct shift, or the 6-speed manual is the best way to go, unless you really have no money and you have to go to the base, which is like 20 grand. So again, handling feels good. The ride quality is supple. I have yet to get over any pavement where this is like, ooh, they got it wrong. This is good for everyday commuting. The fuel economy is really good. At least on the 2-liter, you're gonna expect about 32 to 35 miles per gallon, depending on how you drive. And everything in here is intuitive. The sight lines are good. There's a good amount of glass. I can see everything in here without worrying about a bunch of blind spots. And most of the stuff really does work. The HVAC controls are good. The seat heaters are quick. Everything just feels good when you're in here. And it's a car that I could see myself owning for a long period of time without getting tired of it. Final thoughts on the Corolla Sedan. Much like the Hatch, I did a video on, you can check that out. There's plenty of things to like, and here they are. I really like the engine in this. I think it's one of the best 4-cylinders in the segment without having to resort to turbocharging. It just feels good and light all the time. The second thing that Toyota has figured out with their compact cars, or this new architecture, is they understand how to give you fun driving characteristics. What that means is It feels like you can take corners more than 15 miles an hour without it rolling all over the place. And they've also made it feel fun to drive without sacrificing ride quality. And I see this a lot. Companies think sporty, sporty, sporty. That doesn't even mean anything anymore. And oftentimes companies think, well, if we make it feel stiffer and the steering feels quicker, people are going to like it. But then they trade off ride quality where you actually use the car every day. And the Corolla does a good job at balancing them both. This is a smooth riding car that doesn't crash over bad pavement, and it still retains some fun to drive aspects. Now, the negative part is some of the interior design. I talked about that. The infotainment is a Toyota lowlight. They definitely favor the industrial design, which works. It just doesn't look good. Their infotainment mechanical or the architecture of how they integrate the screen into the dashboards they look horrible. But if you can get over that, the seats, the comfort, the interior layout, the ease to use of stuff is really good. And I think the final thing is, this doesn't look super boring. The car looks, it's representative of what they're trying to do. It's what you see is what you get. It's not trying to be overly aggressive and crazy looking like the Civic, and it's not trying to put you to sleep like the old Corolla did. And I think that's a good thing about the hatch and the sedan. But it's a competitive segment. They sell a cajillion of these. The main reason is they last and they work. That is why you're paying the money to buy a Corolla. With that said, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.